Hello, my name is Nat Wilson from the Kingston Collective, and I'm very excited to be having Hannah Johnson from Twinewood Photography joining us today. Hello, Hannah.
Hey everyone.
Now we're going to be looking at capturing amazing imagery using our smartphones, which we all love to do. We all love to take pictures of, our family, our pets, flowers, gardens, and for those who run businesses, obviously our products that we want to display and share with the world. So this is a really fun topic. So I'm excited and thankful that you were happy to jump in and share with us your expertise.
Thanks for having me.
I also want to say also thank you for signing up to the Kingston Collective Business Directory. That's how I met you, through the directory and signing up. And it's great to be able to work with our members and do fun things like this. So thank you as well.
Thank you.
Now we have had some technical difficulties. We were hoping to do this as a live stream, but Zoom wasn't playing nice today. We couldn't get there. So we are recording our session and then we'll just upload it to the group. We can only do what we can do.
Exactly.
So we jump in. So can you just tell us a little bit about yourself in terms of your photography career? We were discussing before how you're a creative type. Can you just share with that a little bit with us?
Yeah, sure. So for as long as I can remember, I've always been that arty friend. So I'm just one of those all-round creative people who just really enjoys making things. So when I'm not photographing, I'll be drawing or painting or making ceramics. I did a macrame weaving this morning, just casual. So I guess I've always just been a creative soul, and I actually did my first degree in English literature and fine art, painting and drawing before going into teaching. And as much as I loved being in the classroom, I just knew that I was meant to be in the creative industry instead. So I guess my creative journey in terms of my business kind of started when I moved over here, which was about 4 years ago now. So I moved from London to Melbourne. And I just decided to give it a go. People over here are very welcoming and accepting of my random change of career path. And that was how I got started, really. So I took on lots of different creative jobs and really found, the types of clients that I loved working with and the kinds of products that I really enjoyed photographing. And I sort of found my style along the way as well. So that's how I ended up here.
Perfect. And you love, you're doing something that you love and that where your passion lies, which, makes it not really a job, just makes it something that you love doing.
Exactly. It's just something fun to do that I get paid for.
Who doesn't want that? Lovely. Okay, so we're going to look at, capturing imagery using our smartphones. So where do we start when we talk about this? Where's a good starting point?
With anything, it's just deciding what you want to achieve from your photo shoot, really. So first of all, decide what you want to photograph and how you want to photograph it. This is the stage where I Pinterest like a good one. And I often just scroll through Pinterest and get some ideas and really get the visual aesthetic straight in my head, so I know what it is that I'm looking for when I'm putting my set together or putting my shot together. I often draw these as well because I just love to doodle. So I have a little shot list all drawn out, a little plan. That way I don't spend too much time messing around and getting stuff into the shot and then getting it out again and not really knowing what to do. I just know that I'm going to set it up in a certain way as per my inspiration and then get stuck in from the get-go. It's always good to get ideas from other people, but it's also great to take pointers from the product itself. So for example, I shoot a lot of candles and a lot of skincare, which obviously have particular ingredients in. It's always good to work with those sorts of things. If your candle contains a fig scent, for example, then go and grab some figs. It makes perfect sense to do so. And I honestly think that simple is mostly better. So if you're a bit overwhelmed with how to set it up or how to style your photograph, just go the bare minimum first. Grab a really nice bed sheet, pop it on top, put it in a nice lighted spot of your house and see what you get, because often just a simple piece of fabric underneath your product or a nice coloured sheet of paper works really, really well and can be really effective as long as the lighting is good.
Right, which leads us into the next question. Okay, so when you're talking about lighting, is professional lighting, you know, something you need to start with, or
Gosh,
you know,
no. I spent years just using natural light, and actually some of my favourite shoots have still been natural lighting.
yeah,
Often if you just find a really big window or open door in your home and shuffle your products really close to that so that it's getting as much of that natural light as possible, you're going to get some really gorgeous photographs. It depends what kind of shot you're trying to capture, but if you've got the direct sunlight coming in and you're really going for that cool sort of half in, half out shadow look, or you're going for some shadow play, enjoy that. Enjoy the sun being out and have a little play. If, however, you're going for something that's a bit softer and a bit more gentle on your subject, particularly if you're doing portraits, you want that soft lighting. I would recommend popping like a bed sheet or a roller blind, just something down in front of the open window. So I don't know if you can see here, but I've actually done that just here. That way the light diffuses onto your subject. It's a lot softer and less harsh. You can do that with just a simple bed sheet. Bed sheets are one of my favourite props. It's so versatile. But it just gives something for the light to go through. Rather than casting those harsh shadows. So I really don't think you need to invest necessarily in really good quality artificial lighting, especially when you're just starting out. But if you did want to get into that sort of realm, just to start off with, ring lights are really, really cheap and very versatile. Particularly good for portraits, or if you're filming yourself like we are now, and you want that really lovely glow on your face. A ring light can be really good. I think they're about $30 to $80 depending on the quality, but you can get some really good ones where you can control the warmth as well of the light that's actually being cast onto your subject. So generally with portraits, you want that warm sort of dewy glow. Bump it up to the yellow setting, and then if you're going for something cool, maybe skincare, then obviously turn it down to the cooler end. And it's really, really useful. Let's say not very expensive and really helpful if you live in an apartment or a house that doesn't get a lot of natural light.
And what about going outside? So would you say using in front of a big window is better than going outside into the light itself?
Yeah, absolutely. Generally speaking, the window at least gives a little bit of diffusing of the light for you, so it does make it a little bit easier to work with. Also, when you're outside, the things around you can often cast coloured sort of reflections on your subject. So, for example, if you're in a green garden with lots of trees and lots of grass, the light is going to come down, bounce off of the grass and onto your subject. So it means that no matter how you try, your subject is going to look a little bit green. Whereas generally in people's homes, the light comes in, you've got a nice neutral coloured wall, like mine's bright white here. So it just bounces bright, clean light back onto your subject for you, rather than you having to manage, maybe dark fences or green trees, that sort of thing. A lot easier. It's like a nice little room softbox for you. The light's just bouncing all around. Nice clean white light,
which is what you've got there in your gorgeous studio. So we're talking about product and bringing them up to the light. So if you were shooting a person's face, for example, how do you get them to stand? Are they looking directly at the window? What do you suggest?
So generally I say a 45-degree angle is best. If you get them to look directly into the light, so out of the window, and you're sort of standing with your back to the window, or you've set up your phone so it's facing into the room,
Yeah.
Sometimes if the light is too strong, it can sort of filter out all of the features on your face. It makes you look quite flat.
Yeah.
If you stand at a 45-degree angle, generally you get just enough shadow to bring out the features, but not so much shadow that it's really intensely highlighting my big nose. So generally speaking, I'd say 45-degree angle, so I'm like this here to my window, is the most flattering light to go for if you're doing portraits.
Yeah, right. Okay. So that's a good pointer, rather than going directly on. Okay, so we were talking about, setting up your lighting and that. So in terms of the camera, you were talking earlier about a rule of thirds. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, sure. So generally photographers work on a rule of thirds, which is essentially splitting your photograph into a nice 3x3 grid.
Okay. Yep.
And not always, because we always like to break rules where we can, just for fun. But a lot of the time, photographers will try and position their subject, the thing that you want the viewer to look at most, on one of the intersections on your grid.
Okay, so not in the middle of it.
Yeah.
Yep.
There are exceptions to the rule. Things like a flat lay usually works best when the subject or the hero product is in the middle.
Yeah.
But a lot of the time, especially when you're doing portraits, it's nice to try and line up your subject's eyes with one of those intersecting areas in the grid. And it's quite handy on your phones. Pretty much all phones now have the grid available for you to have on your phone when you're taking photographs.
Oh, right.
So jump on into your settings. There'll be a little section where it says grid, which I'll be honest, I only found out like a month ago because I've just been doing it, on my camera as usual when it comes up with that on there. So I'm like, brilliant. And then I went onto my phone and I thought, gosh, it must be on here as well. Like, how have phones not caught up with cameras, and they haven't got this grid? No, sure enough, I went into settings and there it was, grid. Turned that on. It's been a lifesaver.
There we go. Yeah.
So that's really, really good. It's also really handy when you are taking photographs and you really want those nice clean lines. The grid helps you figure out whether you're sort of a little bit too high over your product or a little bit too low. A lot of the time you want your product, the edges of your product, to line up with those lines so that it looks really flat and sharp. So that can really help too.
Right. Well, that is a great tip, I have to say. Thank you for sharing that one, and I'll be
welcome.
later and having a look. Okay, and it's interesting that you don't go center. So
it's just that apparently the eye is more drawn to those sections of photograph rather than the middle.
Yeah.
I'm not entirely sure what the science is behind that, although I suppose if you look at someone's face, you look at their eyes more than you look at their nose. Which is of course in that top third, that's directly on the top third line, as it were. If you were to split your face into a nice 3x3 grid, both eyes would be on the top two intersections.
Yeah.
So, yeah, generally speaking, that's where people look.
Where we're going to look. Yeah, like it. Okay. So when we talk about styling a photo, so you touched on this briefly in the beginning. So, planning it out. You like to draw pictures or get inspiration from Pinterest. So what are your top tips in trying to style an image or a photo?
Yeah, sure. So I think I touched upon it anyway, but simple is usually better.
Yeah.
So if you're going for something very lifestyle rather than just the product on its own, I usually try and include a maximum of 4 props. Any more than that and it starts to look a little bit cluttered. I work with quite a lot of businesses where I go into their shops to help them out, and they always style it beautifully, bless them. And then I'll come in and move everything off of the shelves. And they're like, oh, what are you doing? Like, it's so beautiful. And then I take a photograph of it as it's set up, and I'm like, yeah, it does look beautiful to me. But in this photo, it looks cluttered. Yeah. So generally speaking, if you think it looks a little bit sparse and a little bit empty, the camera's going to love it.
Okay.
So the more room that you leave, the more your eye is going to be drawn to the hero product or subject. So generally 4 is the maximum amount of props that I would suggest including in an image. And a lot of the time I like to have a play as well between a horizontal prop and a vertical prop. So generally I like to put my product on something and next to something is what that translates to.
Okay, so you'll try it both ways generally when you do the shoot.
Yeah, normally I like to have one of each. Okay. So for example, a horizontal prop might be something like a book or a magazine, a plate, a mirror, something like that that you would put underneath your product, yep, just to kind of ground it and make it seem like it's not just floating in air or just sitting there plonked on the side. And then vertical props might be something like your plants or a vase, maybe some bottles or frames, anything that's going to stand upright. Yeah. And it's really good to pay attention as well to the size of those props in relation to the product you're shooting. If you are shooting, for example, a really lovely cake that you've just baked, yeah, you don't want to put it next to a tiny little bottle about this big because it's going to look gigantic and foolish. Yeah. And likewise, the other way around, if you're shooting skincare and it's really small, don't put it next to a massive frame. It's going to look really insignificant and you're probably going to end up looking more at the frame than you are at the skincare.
Yes, okay.
So, yeah, just have a play around with those things and make sure that the props that you choose are both relevant in terms of like the content to your product, yeah, and the right size for your product.
So they're complementary. So yeah, do you have a rule when it comes to, so if you're using, you know, different props to complement your image, is there a layering sort of technique that you have?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh. I do love to layer things, especially when I'm doing flat lays. It's really nice to start with a nice backdrop, so fabric, like I've said before, like a nice bed sheet, really lovely. Scraps of fabric, even like from Spotlight, are really good too, just some offcuts. And then vinyl sheets, you can get that from Kmart. Really cheap. I think they're about $3. And I just cover like old plywood, offcuts of wood that I have with like the marble vinyl, for example. It's really handy, especially if you're shooting food or something that's going to get a bit messy. You can just wipe it down.
Yes, yeah, perfect.
And then you'd be looking at layering on your horizontal props. So the things like the mirrors, the plates, that sort of thing, and building up a little bit. Trying not to go too crazy, like you don't want 4 horizontal props and it just be like plate upon plate upon plate. Unless you're photographing the plates, and then maybe you do. But it can be really handy, you know, if you're shooting skincare, for example, to have the nice vinyl background, then a plate, then a smaller little dish, and then the skincare on top. It just gives a little bit of depth to the photograph. And you can always play around with putting more in and taking more out, depending on what you think.
Yeah, lovely. Okay. How long would you say a shoot would normally take you to do? So, because you're talking about having, you know, a horizontal, a vertical option, you know, you put layers in and take them out. How many, you know, shots do you think you'd have at the end to choose from?
It really depends on the type of shoot that I'm doing.
Okay, yeah.
And if inspiration strikes. Sometimes I look at a scene and I'm like, I love everything about this, and I'll be there for like 6 hours. But generally speaking, the minimum I would set aside for 10 shots is an hour, and that would be if it's very simplistic. Yeah. If you're looking at more detailed shots or shots that require multiple takes, I don't know if you've seen like the water shots, for example, for skincare, where you've got like the water going around the shot, and that's always really fun to do, but they always take a lot longer. Or things that are highly stylized with a you know, a decent element of lifestyle to them, so it really looks like a coffee table setup. That's going to take a bit longer. Yeah, for sure. Okay, sorry, that was off script. I love it.
Now, you've mentioned a few times about doing flat lays. Now, I had to ask the question, so I'm going to assume someone else will want to ask the question. What is a flat lay for someone who doesn't know photography?
Yep, sure. So a flat lay is, well, as the name suggests, you lay everything flat on the ground.
Yeah.
So the shot is always taken from directly above your subject and completely flush to it as well. So there's no sort of angling of it. It is directly above your flat laying product. Often for a flat lay, you pop the subject in the middle and then surround it with objects that might be relevant to it. So if you were photographing a diary, for example, you would put that in the middle, and then you might surround it with some pens, some organizational props, you know, some little paper clips, things like that. But you would sort of scatter those around, I guess. They're really, really popular on Instagram and Pinterest. So you've probably seen one, even though you don't necessarily know what it's called.
Yeah. And now you explain it, like the term. You first explain it to me, I'm like, oh, of course. But the term, it could be something else. Yeah.
But yeah, that's what that one is. It's actually really easy to get that going for yourself as well. I tend to recommend to people to set up their camera a little bit higher. I would just lean it even off of the edge of your dining room table.
Okay, yeah.
That way you know that it's flat. And then you can go in underneath where your camera is already set up and put all of your props, pop your product down. And it's really great because with a flat lay, you can see real time what it looks like underneath and just keep switching it around and swapping it out. So that one's really easy, as I say, for newbies, for beginners. If you can just set it up on something that's a little bit higher than where you want to set up your actual product, somewhere flat.
The camera will be steady too. So have you got a tip of, you know, so say you've got your hero product, how far spread out your other props should be? Like, is there a rule of thumb for that type of?
Generally speaking, I say set it up so that your eye thinks it looks good and then move everything out. So more space is always better with a flat lay. The closer your props are to your product, the more they're being focused on by the viewer. Okay. So you kind of want your product to be the hero. You want everyone to be looking at that and everything else to just make sense around it, but not really be taking any of the attention from it. So if you think there's a great amount in there, take a few items out, move it all out about 2 centimeters, and give your hero product a bit more room to breathe.
Yeah, yeah. Give it the throne to sit on.
Yes. These are actually really good as well for if you want to jump into video making.
Yes, yeah.
They can be really fun because you've already got it set up in a stationary position. So you've got it on your dining room or coffee table and it's already set, and you're not going to wobble it or anything. You can take multiple pictures and sort of slightly move what's in the frame. I like to keep the hero product in its position and just move the things around it and take a heap of different photos, all set up in exactly the same way, but just moving something ever so slightly. And then you can actually combine these to make a GIF so that it looks like everything around it is just slightly having a dance.
Yeah, that's cool. That's a
great idea.
Yeah, that sounds fun. Is there a particular site that you use to create those GIF image?
Yeah, I use gifmaker.me.
Yep.
I can put that in the comments for this for everyone else afterwards. It's super, super easy. You literally just upload your photographs to it, click make video, and it does it all for you.
Don't you love that? Yeah.
It's so easy.
And fun. Okay, now we'll talk about props before. So where do you think is the best place to source props from? You know, dried flowers or, you know, well, it depends what you're shooting, of course, but is there a place that you like to go in particular to get your props?
I'm a big fan of the op shops.
Okay. Yeah.
Outside of lockdown, obviously. Op shops are great and they have so much variety in them as well. So I always pick up random pretty little things when I see them, even if I don't have a photo shoot in mind for it. I actually have a whole cupboard just
Yeah.
filled with little knickknacks that can be used for styling.
Yeah.
On top of that, I like to support other small business owners when it comes to things like dried flower arrangements. I tend to work quite a lot with a still home. She's wonderful and she provides all of the dried flowers for my photo shoots. She's great. So if you can kind of get some, you know, some connections and relationships going with other small businesses, it's always really helpful. You know, they need the content and you need the styling props. Sometimes you can do a bit of a swapsy, you know, or just supporting other small business owners just feels so good. So as much as you probably could go and get a heap of really nice styling props from Kmart, I would always try and support a small business first.
Love it. That's what we're all about. Like it. Now, another question when we're talking about, now, do you think it's best to photograph one product at a time for socials, or more than one in, you know, in a session? So get them all done in one session and use them, or?
Yeah, I mean, it depends sort of what you're actually photographing. Of course, if you're, say, a baker, doing all of your bakery goods in one go is probably going to be a bit intense. But generally speaking, I like to shoot a whole range or collection of products together.
Yeah.
The reason being is, especially if you're using natural light, that light is going to change, and you don't want one of your products in this really warm, beautiful, soft light, and then the next product in very cool, dark setting.
Yeah.
You know, it's nice to have a bit of variety in your feed every now and again, but generally speaking, if you're trying to keep the branding consistent, you need to keep the lighting consistent, and it's going to be a lot easier if you've got a nice setup and the light is good to shoot all of them in one go.
Yeah, perfect. And it's funny you say that because we did a session with Jessica Roberts about branding. And one of the main points she said was about consistency. You know,
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
art. So, you know,
Yeah,
that is connected here too with your photography.
absolutely.
So another question we've got here, filters. What do you feel about filters on your phone?
The personal question, I guess. I'm not a fan of them.
Okay.
Filters, I think, because they are preset, don't suit everything all the time. Although they're great for adding a little bit of interest to your Instagram stories if you're filming and you know you just, I don't know, want your bunny ears on. When you're doing a shoot that you're hoping to look professional, it's always best to shoot as it is. You can always edit the photographs afterwards, but if you shoot with a filter on it, you're never going to be able to change that. And it also tends to make it look less professional because that filter isn't actually designed for your specific setup. Whereas if you've taken the photograph and you go, okay, I love this setting, love the shot, it's nice and sharp, but I wish it were a little bit warmer. Then you go in and edit that in maybe Lightroom for mobile. It's completely free, so that one's I really recommend. The Lightroom app. It looks far more professional than if you put a filter over it to begin with.
Yeah. Okay. So no filters.
Preferably not.
Okay. When you're shooting a video, do you have any tips of keeping your camera still?
Yes. So you can buy little tripods for your cameras if you know that you're going to be shooting a whole heap of content. There we go. Look at that. Oh, modeling it for me. I love it.
I should have done it better than that.
Beautiful, beautiful. My glamorous assistant. Thank you. Those are really handy if you know you're going to shoot a heap of content. Like if you're doing, you know, like we are here, video tutorials, and you know it's going to be a regular thing. However, if you're just doing one to see if you like it, one of my best tips is to actually put it in a mug or a glass so that you basically keep it still.
Yeah, what a great
be able to fit, but you can just pop it in the top like this, so that it stays in one position.
Well, there you go.
Other things you can use are like candles, anything that props it up
where you can fit it in. Yeah.
so that it stays where it is good.
Yeah.
It's much better than your hand.
Yeah. Then you get the shakes and
Shakes.
Yeah. So in terms of equipment, so for those who have been using their phones and want to, you know, progress into, you know, proper camera, have you got any suggestions for equipment for people to buy?
Yeah, I mean, I personally am a Sony user. I haven't always been, so I'm not one of those people who sort of like pins my flag to a particular brand, but I do really love my Sony. I think really it's more about getting used to your camera and really sticking with it. So once you make an investment, hopefully in a full frame camera rather than a crop sensor, stick with it, because it can be a little bit difficult to begin with, and I know some people get disheartened very quickly and they're like, oh, it's not as easy as my phone, but it takes so much better photographs once you actually get your head around it and you get into it. You've watched a few YouTube tutorials, that's really good. As well, I would recommend getting some lenses that are specific for the type of photographs that you want to capture.
Yeah.
So if you're looking to do portraits, for example, you know, get yourself a 50 or a 55mm lens. You can rent these very easily as well. I have rented a lot of my lenses before purchasing them through Ted's Cameras.
That's a great idea.
It's really, really good. You can trade them in as well if you don't like them. So if you try it out for a few months and you're like, no, I don't really fancy this one, it's not doing what I want it to, I think I would prefer this one, you can always go in and swap it.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit like a library service, I guess, but for lenses.
Perfect. No, that's a great idea. Yeah, just to get you started.
So, yeah.
Lovely. You have given so many tips today.
Hopefully it's helpful.
Yeah, I think everyone definitely would have learned something, you know, from setting it up, styling it, to thinking about what you're going to do before you start it. Yeah, there's so many valuable tips. So thank you so much for your time and for helping. If someone did want to work with you, what's the best way for people to get in contact with you?
Yeah, sure. So if you did want to work with me, you can always jump over to my website, which is www.twinewoodstudio.com, or you can send me an email, twinewoodstudio@gmail.com. Yeah, anything really.
Yeah, perfect. So you've got the Twinewood Studio, so that's sort of the parent brand.
Yeah.
And you've got your Twinewood Photography.
Yeah. So you can find me on Facebook and on Instagram as Twinewood Photography.
Yeah, lovely. All right, well, thank you so much for your time today. I'm sorry we had trouble with the...
Oh, you can never count on technology, hey?
But we problem solved it. We got around it. So thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it. And I look forward to meeting you in person.
Yes, thank you for having me.